I'm taking on a new water this autumn. I did 3 sessions and I caught a fish every time, so I was happy with that, but I've had a few issues. Now, I love a simple mono rig. This is what I've been using on this big water. Really simple, really robust. But the problem I'm having with it, I'm trying to use 25-pound armor link as a hook link, and it's tough enough and it's strong enough, but it's not thick enough to give me the tangle resistance that I need when I'm trying to smack it into a headwind as far as I can cast. So I'm going to have to step up the material. I need to use something more robust, just because I'm fishing long range. This would be perfectly suitable for casting 70, 80 yards, but I'm trying to do 90, 100 yards into a headwind. It's just not stiff enough. I just don't have the tangle resistance. I could just make a basic mono hair rig with thicker material. I could go to 0.50 or 0.60, but I've done that. The problem is when you use hardened baits with a mono hair, this loop knot here is quite large and lumpy, and you have to drill them out, and it's not ideal. So I wanted to come up with a better solution, and I also wanted a solution that is going to work with a snowman presentation, because the water's quite clear on this lake, and I've been chatting to one of the local lads and he's done very well on Snowman, so I've come up with a new little rig to try. It's not rocket science, it's nothing revolutionary, but it is different. So that's a size 5 chod twister, and I've made a bait loop. No one that I've ever seen has used a bait loop, but if you go back as far as the Christen days, you'll see bait loops on their instruction packet, and there's a little bait loop there, and it's just simply made, that's the end of it there, and it's a little bait loop with a micro ring swivel. And what that's going to enable me to do is put a snowman cut and blob straight onto that. That's 0.60 mono. That's the heavy duty snag leader, so 40-pound material, much stiffer, very anti-tangle, and I've got a 6mm bead on there just to help the rig sit absolutely pancake flat on the deck. So to make up a snowman, obviously we need some pop-ups. We're going to stick on a nice pink Scopex squid so that it sits nice on top of the bottom bait. I'm going to very carefully trim off a flat so it sits flat like that. And I'm going to take one of my toughened baits. I'm going to cut a flat of about the same size so that that fits perfectly on there like that. So that's a 24mm bottom bait with a 15mm pop-up, and I know from tank testing that that's going to be a nice combination. So to get this nice and neat, if I just pierce it when it's all together like that, try and get the boiling needle relatively upright. That hasn't gone too bad actually. Then we're going to take some bait floss. So what we do is we take the bait floss and we pass that through the micro swivel. You don't have to use a ring swivel, you could just use a normal ring, but you want to pass it through so that there's about 10 centimeters of doubled over material. We'll cut that off there, and we slide the bottom bait on and the pop-up on, pull it all through and pull the ring swivel in like that. I don't want to bury that ring swivel too deep in there, because when that bait gets wet that is going to swell up. If I pulled it all the way in, by the time the bait has swelled up I'll be interfering with this hinge and pivot and swivel that I've created there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off that, blob that, and then simply press that on there like that. Using something metallic like that will stop that from sticking. So some anglers are going to absolutely hate that big burnt blob of plastic on there, but it really doesn't matter. Carp are not going to know that that's there. There's no kind of edge. They're not going to be able to smell that burnt plastic at all. It's going to be drowned by the flavours coming off the pop-up and the bottom bait. And I'm going to put some hook bait spray over this as well before I cast it out. And because of the bait loop mounting that I've created there, that pop-up is going to sit upright like that, and when the fish picks it up you'll see that the hook swings down perfectly vertically. It's going to go up into the mouth and it's going to catch nicely on the hook point there. So that's the way it's designed to work. And I've just found that a little tungsten weight, you could use putty there, just helps that rotate round beautifully. That's exactly what I'm looking to achieve. I'm taking this big water on day sessions only, so literally every minute counts in those situations. So rig already pre-baited basically the night before I'm going. Then all I've got to do is get installed, tie that on and whack them out. When those 3 rigs are in play, I shall ready mount up baits on 3 more rigs so that if I have to recast or I get a fish, I've got a brand new rig ready to go and I can just literally cut that old one off, put a brand new one on, and there's no checking, there's no inspection. It's just really quick and efficient fishing. So I put one at the right wind turbine, one in the middle of the turbines, and then I just aim this one at the left. And that's the strip I baited yesterday. So 20 metres between each rig. Yep, never felt the donk again, but like I say, I'm not worried. There we go, 3 in play. Let's hope we get a taker. Well, that was an absolute ripper of a take. 1 toner out of the blue. I didn't think it was going to happen today, but battle is won, and we've got ourselves a nice common, I think. I think that's my first 20 from here, which is nice, very clean fish. Really happy with the new rigs though. I mean, I smashed those out in dark early this morning, and yeah, when they do the business like this for you, you know you're onto a winner. Lovely water clarity here, and that's why I've decided to use some pink pop-ups for a change on the top of the bottom bait Snowman. So the running rig worked exactly as it should. That little top bead there just flew off the top of the tubing, no problem. And that little bait loop, yeah, it's good actually. Micro ring swivelers come out during the fight. Bait's a bit chewed, I need to refresh that. I don't even need an eyeglass to tell you that that hook's completely done. You can see the bent point there, you feel it with my finger. Job done, time for a new one. One of the secrets of being successful on large waters is to fish facing into the wind. This is a 30-hectare venue, so that's about 70 acres, so it's a big old chunk of water, and I really do need to get out as far as I can just to be in with a shout of a bite. The problem when you're casting into the wind is it is going to cost you a lot of yards, and I was just losing too much distance with the setup that I was using. So this is the setup that I was using. So these are 9 foot 3.5 pound stepped up scope specials. I was using my normal quick change running lead system. So that's the little Fox ring run ring there sat on the Nash helicopter sleeve. That's cool, that all worked and stuff, but I just wasn't getting the distance I need. So for this next attempt I'm going to swap back to my old setup, which is the Harrison Aviators with the old Ultragra CI4 10,000s. So that's a 12-foot rod with a 3 pound 6 ounce test curve. The next problem I've got to solve is when I swap from 9-foot rods to 12-foot rods, I'm going to be putting more energy into the lead. And more energy means more force. So I normally use the Fox run ring, which will break at about 10 pound of force. And I'm concerned that when I put a 3.5 distance lead on that, I'm going to be hitting the rod hard enough and I could potentially break off the lead on the cast. That's no use. So I'm going to swap the type of run ring I use. So for 90% of my fishing, the Fox run ring works because it introduces a breakaway element into the setup. I've done a couple of sessions on this lake and I haven't had any issues with the lead getting trapped, so I'm going to use a more robust run ring that can withstand the force of the cast. I don't believe I'm going to have an issue with lead getting trapped, so I'm happy to make this change. So that's the normal run ring setup I use, Nash heli sleeve with a little top bead, Fox run ring and a quick change clip. So we want to swap out this run ring, and I'm going to put one of these on. These ones are made by Drennan. No breakaway effect, but they're going to take the load of the cast. So that's a 0.50 leader. I've got about 4.5 meters of that, 5 meters of that, and then I've got 12-pound main line behind that. I'm just going to take a standard size 8 swivel, no quick change, because I'm just tying on basic mono hair rigs directly to that. I'm just going to use the basic half blood knot. Ooh, and that's why I pull hard. I'd rather bust on the bank than bust on a fish. Nice. So on a good day, I'm hoping to hit 120, 130 yards. So for a lot of my fishing, I would use something like this, which is the dumpy pair. That's a 3.5 ounce, could be a 3 ounce, anything like that would do most of the time. But for maximum distance, you want to use a long, thin, tapered lead like that. So that's 99 gram, 3.5 ounce. Could use a 4 ounce, but to be honest, I find I can cast a 3.5 ounce farther. I just don't have the hand speed and the power to get the most out of a 4 ounce lead, to be fair. That's going to go on there like that, and that's all I need. That is a distance running lead setup. So that top bead is just on there to stop the lead separating in flight on the cast, and then I'm going to land the lead on the water like that, so the lead's going to be under tension, and when I get a bite, that little bead there is just going to pop off. There we go, no force at all. Lightly nicked on there, that's how you want it. Dunk, and it's a pure running ledger. Screaming takes, hooked up every time, no hook pulls, absolutely totally bomb proof. And because I've got quite a long length there, if I do cast that into silt, the lead is going to plunge into the silt somewhat. It can plunge in, 10 centimeters, but it's not going to affect the mechanics of the running ledger at all. So even if I don't get a donk on the cast, I'm getting a dull thud, to be honest. So anything like that, absolutely fine in silt. You do not need a helicopter to fish effectively in silt. And I'm using the Drennan ring instead of the Fox ring for this next session, because that is going to be able to withstand the force of the cast better. The Fox ring would potentially break on the cast at this point here, which is absolutely no use whatsoever. Just for ultimate anti-tangle resistance, I'm adding an extra long tungsten sleeve there. That gets pulled together like that. So you've got all the rotation, all the freedom of movement from that ring there. And I'd fish that simple setup 120, 130 yards with absolute confidence it was going to do a bite. Now, unlike the last time I was here, I'm not really trying to max these casts out. It's about, I'd say 90% really of what I can do. So I'm really not worrying too much about, there's no hitting the clip. I'm not even feeling these leads down, to be honest. It's difficult on a big pit like this. You don't want to overthink it. Learnt that lesson a long time ago. Just launch some bait out there as best you can. Launch some rigs out there as best you can. And if the rigs are good enough, then it's going to work. And 2 back-to-back takes says it works. So the casting range of these 12 footers is beyond what I can do with a stick. So even if I'm at 80 or 90% with these rods, I'm not getting my freebies out that far. So in effect what I'm doing is I'm creating a line of bait and I'm presenting my rigs over the back of it. So that means when the carp come in on the wind, they're actually going to find my rigs first. It works. I don't worry about liners and stuff. I haven't had a liner in the 4 sessions that I've been here. I've caught 6. When you're spreading 24mm baits over a 40-metre line, there's so much space between the baits. So that line of bait is just creating a big amount of attraction for the carp. And the wind's pushing them into me. The bait's drawing them in as well. In it to win it. So that's how I've wound it back in. 0 issues, that's what we want to see. So that was fishing effectively. Bait hardness is good, no whittling, no nibbling. The floss blob was big enough, so there's no pull through at all. Yeah, it looks like the little top bead there has probably come off on impact, on contact with the water, because I couldn't feel this rig down. But anyway, that wouldn't have affected things. I know it's a bit silty out there, and the silt's preserving the hook point, so I'm literally going to just respray that hook bait up and wang it back out. Always a good idea to splash the spool properly before making a big chuck. The last thing you want is a wind knot and a crack off, not in conditions like this. Wind is absolutely ripping line off the reel. After the cast, I had to wind down really quickly just to gather the line in, otherwise you'd be line all over the shop. And I stopped the lead before it hits the water, otherwise you'll have line, well, all over the show. So I don't mess around with feature finding on a water like this. It's a total waste of time, really. I literally get a single and cast it right into the teeth of the wind, just as far as I can get. Which today is not very bloody far. I know it's really hard to get your head around the fact that you can rock up to a massive water like this and launch 3 singles out and actually have the gall to expect to catch. But I've done a lot of it. It's still it always a massive buzz when it happens, but it works if you've done your prep in terms of your rigs are right, your hooks are spot on, you've got a lead system that you trust, that you've got a rig that won't tangle in flight. I know there's poisson chat, I know there's crayfish in here, I know that rig is going to get played with. My baits got chewed to hell yesterday. 2 of the rigs didn't even have a bait on in the end, because the baits I used were just straight out of the bag, too soft for this water. Thought I could get away with it and I couldn't, simple as. So we got a lot of wind, it's difficult to cast. I just want to cast a single, a really attractive single. I can't put a stick on today, I can't put a stringer on. It's too hard to cast, I'll lose too many yards. So I've done 4 trips now to this new water, but after my first couple of trips I felt like I had to make a few tweaks. In those early trips I still caught a couple, but it wasn't until that I made the tweaks that on my 4th session I had an absolute red letter day, and I had 6 carp to 40 pound in a day session. It's always a massive buzz to catch a carp from a new water. There's always something new to learn. But when I go to a new water, I don't make big sweeping changes. It's little tweaks, little adjustments. I keep everything else the same, change what I'm not happy with, and that's what gets me the results. I only make changes to solve specific problems. Sometimes things need just a little bit of a tune-up. My starting point is always a mono rig. The first decision I've got to make, well, what diameter of mono am I going to use? Is it 0.3? Is it 0.50? Is it 0.60? Ignore the breaking strain, choose on diameter, and choose a diameter that's stiff enough to do the job that you need it to do for the water that you're fishing. On some waters, I don't need anything more complicated for a hook link other than the 0.35 monofilament main line that I'm using for the main line. Just use that for the hook link. If you're not fishing big range and the carp aren't massive and there's not many snags, then just a bit of main line is all you need for a carp hook link. It doesn't have to say carp hook link on the spool for it to work as a carp hook link. It's a myth. The bottom line is the further I've got to cast, the thicker the mono I need to use for the hook link, because I need that tangle resistance. The highest I've ever had to go to is 0.60, and I know that with 0.60 hook link I can smash it out daylight or at dark into a big wind or a big crosswind, and I know that that rig is going to land tangle free. I do not introduce any hinges or brakes or supple sections at all. It's 0.60 mono all the way through to make the entire rig. That's why I'm a massive fan of mono rigs. Mono is cheap, it's readily available, you've got a load on your fishing reel anyway. Once you can master the knotless knot, there are a few options that you can create to actually finish the rig. You can just make a hair, you can make a big D, you can make a bait loop rig. Plenty of options, but they're all based around the knotless knot and mono. Once you've mastered the art of tying a simple knotless knotted mono rig and you're successfully catching on your local water, the only thing that you're ever going to have to change is perhaps a different way of mounting the bait, or use thicker or thinner mono depending on where you start to. So by focusing on the basics and only using the knotless knotted rig, your progression through the sport is going to be very rapid. There's nothing to relearn. You've mastered the knotless knot, you go to a bigger water with more of a challenge, bigger fish, casting further, more snags, more hazards, just use thicker mono. Nothing else has to change for you to be consistently successful.